I was in London recently to cover the opening of Love Never Dies, the sequel to Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera. And when I picked up the papers the day after the show opened, every single critic referred to a label that has been attached to the show. It is now called Paint Never Dries, which tells you all you need to know about Love Never Dies. That phrase that has gone round the world was created by the West End Whingers, who have become a huge force in the London theater. They are passing through New York now to take some shots at some of Broadway's latest shows, and they've stopped by to visit us here at Theater Talk. So I want to welcome the West End Whingers, Andrew and Phil. Hello. We do not give last names, right?
No.
And why is that? So people won't find you and kill you?
Not very interesting, really. They've got very boring names.
And they've come with someone whose last name we can give. A great friend of mine, Mark Shenton, very influential in London theater himself, as the critic for the Sunday Express, The Stage, and Playbill.com's London correspondent. Welcome, Mark.
Hi.
All right, guys. I've got to ask you, paint never dries. Has it changed your lives since you came up with that line?
It was quite a shock, I think.
What happened?
Well, it's just I was sitting there, blogging away on the Tuesday, the day it opened, and they were previewing a news item on the lunchtime news, and they used Paint Never Dries. And I immediately sort of looked up, and then during the report on the opening, they used it again, and then it seemed every news bulletin that day on every channel were using it.
Now, who came up with that line? Because you guys write together, right?
Yeah, it was him. It's his fault.
Right,
if Andrew Lloyd Webber's watching, he's the one you want to put the
That's why I don't use my surname, because I'm in the telephone directory. Yeah.
So you went to a fairly early preview of Love Never Dies.
No, it was a week in, and they only did 2 weeks of previews, so I think we were pretty fair.
Gave him a chance.
And you were sitting there, and did the line occur to you while you were watching it, or while you left, or at the bar later?
Afterwards, when we were writing it up, yeah. I mean, it was like watching paint dry. We were bored, and I think that's the one thing. We'll go and see anything. As long as we're not bored, we're going to be fairly happy. But when you're looking at your watch, and what was the line about time passing or something, and you just think, it's not passing. Yeah.
It's been 30 seconds since I set my watch.
Mark, how, you're new media because you blog, but you're also old media. How influential have the West End Whingers become in the London theatre scene with their early reviews of shows?
Well, I think the world has definitely changed, as you say, and one of the things is that the timetable has changed. Just as you can't stop the word getting out in New York, thanks to things like All That Chat. In London, there are bulletin boards, but they're not nearly as influential as All That Chat. I mean, there's one bulletin board that everybody reads in London in the same way as here. But one thing we do, and everybody does in London, is the moment the West End Whingers publish a review, everybody's onto it. Now, that's slightly frustrating for the conventional critics, who of course...
they're putting you out to pasture, my friend.
Well, indeed, we're well aware that that's happening anyway.
Yes,
But the point is that these guys get ahead of the game because they buy their tickets and therefore are entitled to do so. I mean, there's no embargo for them, whereas we, of course, are embargoed by the hospitality we're extended. And there's a protocol for the way we work, which there isn't for these guys. Of course, what's interesting is that as the landscape is changing, the establishment are beginning to realise this, and they're co-opting them.
Yes.
And they're actually inviting them now to press nights.
Do you feel that there's now a deliberate deliberate attempt on the part of West End producers to try to bring you guys into the fold so they can control your time?
Right. Some of them, because they can slow us down because we can't get ahead of the game.
Do you accept these invitations?
Oh yeah, so it costs a fortune to go to the cinema. It does actually, but it costs even more to go to the theatre in London. And if we can get to see shows for free, we don't mind waiting for the embargo to.
But then that's going to undermine the power that you've...
It does weaken us. Yeah, it would have certainly with... I was going to say Paint Never Dries. I can't say that.
Everybody calls it Paint Never Dries now.
Yeah.
The thing is that these guys have begun to get an authoritative voice. I mean, for better or for worse, whether or not you agree with them, you begin to know, we know who they are. We know what they like and what they don't like. So you've got something to judge against. The average blogger, of course, you have no idea who they are.
But how did you get this notoriety?
Because partly it's also the fact that they write so much and they've seen so long.
And they've been doing it for
4 years.
It's not an overnight success.
No.
Paint Never Dries.
And
that's the one good gag we've come up with in 4 years.
Paint Never Dries, and the money's rolling in. Can I ask you, who are you guys? Phil, what do you do when you're not a West End Whinger? How do you make a living?
I'm an illustrator, freelance illustrator.
Really?
Yeah.
For
You sound surprised.
I
What do I
have a
look
skill.
like? A rock star. Yeah.
and Andrew, what do you do to make a living?
Well, that's a complicated story. The short version is I used to work in publishing, and I actually took voluntary redundancy last year because I just needed a change. So at the moment I'm building a couple of projects which I can't really talk about at the moment.
Well, what got you going? What made you think, we should go and have reviews about all this place?
That question.
Picture it.
Yeah.
At the Apollo Theatre
Yeah.
4 years ago. Full for
Full for
Love.
Love,
With
Sam
Juliette
Sampson.
Lewis. Was it 5 stars in Time Out?
Well, 6 stars, because they used to have a 6-star rating,
Yeah,
didn't
6
they, in those
stars,
days,
yeah,
just to
yeah.
confuse everybody. And I think we paid a decent amount of money to go and see this, and it was just rubbish, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was just rubbish. And it was like the third rubbish thing in a row that we'd been to see, and we were in a pub afterwards and just complaining to each other about it and moaning, and then we just sort of had this idea that rather than depressing each other, we should just moan outwardly to the world. And
Well, Andrew actually said we should do a blog, and I said, "What's a blog?"
So you went home, turned on the computer, fired it up, and
Yeah.
and how did you
just
come up
started
with the
writing.
West End Whingers? And what is whinging? Is
Well,
not
I
a term
found that
we
was
use
me
here.
again. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that was you. He's the creative one.
Well, I'm not really.
I'm
I
the
mean, Andrew's
brains.
the talented one. I'm just the one who comes out with the sound bites because it just saves time, really.
And whinging means it's not a term we have
Complaining,
here.
whining.
Complaining,
Don't you have
whining.
whinging?
No, we don't really have
do.
whinging.
You
I
do.
suppose.
Kvetching, yeah.
you
Kvetching.
do plenty of
Oh,
it.
I like
so,
that.
Yeah, well, that's me. I'm a whinger
You're
in
a
my
professional
own,
whinger.
in my own particular. And Mark,
assassin.
when did you begin to become aware of the West End Whingers? When did they really make
Well,
an
the
impact?
interesting thing is that there's a great thing called Google, isn't there? And you put in a name of a show, and things will come up at the top of the list. And you started to find after a while that their reviews were coming up, because they were the only reviews around, were coming up early before anybody else. And also just suddenly the word filtered out that they're very, very entertaining. I mean, they're very, very funny, whether or not you agree. I mean, the Death and the King's Horseman review that they did at the National Theatre was outright hilarious. And if anybody needs to see just how funny they are, then you just go and check
Was there
that
a
one out.
paint never dries moment in the Death and the King's Horseman review anywhere?
that was a kind of formal thing, really, rather
the way
than
it's structured.
gags.
You don't know what Death and
There was what was the verse play?
Well, it's a Nigerian play.
It
What
was
they did-
culturally insensitive.
What they did do is they wrote it as if it was one of those Nigerian scam emails trying to get you to send them money. And it was genius. It was genius. And the whole thing was written in that style. Dear sir, dear wonderful sirs, we have this wonderful play at the National Theatre.
And if you
please send
deposit
us-
$1,000 in the
Yes.
bank account.
So, as I say, go and read it because it's brilliant.